Hello, I'm Justine Earl-Smith, ASFA's Commercial Director. Today we are in the ASFA studio with NAB. For 2 decades, NAB has conducted a comprehensive survey of superannuation funds. To discuss the launch of NAB's 2023 FX Hedging Survey, I'm delighted to welcome our guests, NAB's Head of FX Sales, Jamie Bonnick, and Head of FX Strategy, Ray Attrell. Thank you for being here.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Justine.
Jamie, to you first. Tell us a bit about this year's FX survey.
Well, it's our 11th biennial survey. So as you mentioned, spanning more than 2 decades. So it's the only survey of its type dedicated specifically for the superannuation industry, which is fantastic. In 2021, despite COVID, we had around 51 respondents covering roughly $2 trillion in institutional assets, which is about 80% of institutional managed money. So it's deep, it's broad, and it has a strong data series going back a long time. It covers everyone really, from the smallest funds right through to funds with more than 150 billion. And we try to capture every segment as well. So there's a good smattering of corporate funds, retail funds, government funds, and of course the big industry funds. When we compile the data in aggregate form, we also have a couple of subsets that we get through so that funds can judge themselves against their peers and their groupings. So it's a deep, good data series, and it's very popular with the industry.
Okay. And Jamie, what are the main focus areas for this year?
Well, look, for consistency's sake, given that we've gone back 20 years, there are a key series of questions that we maintain around currency management and exposures that funds are managing. But we always add a few additional areas. So this year, we're particularly interested to see what the rising rates environment, I'll correct myself, has had in terms of impact on investment decisions, particularly around strategic asset allocation, I think. We're always interested in the way that people manage liquidity, those hedges, particularly given the interest in unlisted assets and the growth of exposure to unlisted assets. And we really want to understand just how investment decisions have been impacted by the performance testing for the Your Future, Your Super, which I think is topical for everyone. There are a couple of smaller items that we touch on. Geopolitical risk, given Russia-Ukraine environment, the Asia-Pacific Rim region, always interesting. So how is that having an impact on emerging markets exposures? And then I guess lastly, we have just a few questions on ESG. Most industry funds are committed to a net zero investment policy, sometime between 2030 and 2050. And we're trying to just gauge how people are setting up for that and what their overall strategy is.
Okay. Ray, to Jamie's earlier point, do you expect to find a continuation of the trends around offshore investment and appetite for unlisted assets?
Yeah, I think so. And without wishing to sort of jump the gun on the survey, we'd certainly expect to see a continuation of some of the key themes that have emerged in the last couple of surveys, although we suspect there could be some variance between particularly the smaller funds and the larger funds as to the extent of the continuation of those trends. Specifically, I think at sort of the macro level, if you like, continued internationalization of investment portfolios. As funds sort of seek more diversification and their assets under management continue to grow, the opportunity set, as we know, and the ability to invest in certain thematics like climate transition, for example, obviously are not unlimited here in Australia. So how that's played out in terms of the sort of offshore asset allocation, I think would be a particular point of interest in the survey. One of the key features, I think, of the 2021 survey was the increased appetite that funds had for investing in private markets. So again, we'd expect to see that trend has continued in the last couple of years. And not unrelated to that, and to Jamie's point about sort of the rising interest rate environment, obviously, the survey comes against the backdrop of the last 18 months where we've seen this huge shift in or pivot in central bank policies and what that's done to interest rates and fixed income returns in particular. So how that's impacted on funds thinking about investing in traditional fixed income investments, and to some extent that does sort of intersect with their enthusiasm for private markets, I think, is going to be an interesting feature. And then if we think about it at the micro level, again, one of the features of recent surveys has been the growing importance of investment teams in terms of the overall decision-making capability within funds. So I'd be surprised if we didn't see that, the influence of investment teams has continued to grow in the last couple of years. But I think the real value of the survey is that it really covers such a wide range of areas relevant to funds and meeting their fiduciary obligations. So, whether you're a small fund or a large fund, we're fairly convinced that you'll find, some significant value in the results of this year's survey.
Excellent. Well, I think it's going to be a really interesting outcome based on what's been happening the last couple of years. Ray, how do funds participate in the survey this year? And when do you expect to have the results?
Mm-hmm. Well, all funds have now been contacted by the NAB team and given a unique survey link, which they can use to participate in the survey. It's very important to stress that all individual responses are confidential. Responses will be only used in anonymous and aggregated form, and if there are particular questions that a fund feels a little bit uncomfortable answering, then they're quite at liberty to skip those and move on to the next set of questions. The survey fielding, as I say, it started now. We expect it'll be in the field probably through June and through the end of July, and would hope to have the results available sometime in September. And everyone who participates in the survey will have the opportunity to get an individual briefing from members of the NAB Currency Overlay and FX research teams. And also, while we're hoping to publish the results in September, we'll also be looking to present the results and hopefully engage in a detailed discussion with industry experts at the ASFA conference in Adelaide in November.
Thank you, Ray, and thanks to you too, Jamie. We're looking forward to hearing the results of the survey, both here in the ASFA studio and at conference in Adelaide in November. In the ASFA studio, I'm Justine Earl-Smith. Thanks for watching.